was October the 10th, 1940, deep into the Battle of Britain. Squadron number 253 were on a routine patrol mission when roughly 30 minutes into their flight, one of the group suddenly went into a steep dive. And what happened next was one of Maidstone's worst wartime disasters. But to start this story, we should probably go back to where it actually began. Welcome to RAF Kenley. Located in Surrey in southeast England, it isn't exactly a fully functioning RAF airfield anymore, and now hosts a volunteer gliding squadron, with the use of any powered aircraft being currently prohibited. You're not going to get any modern military planes taking off from here anymore, but in 1940, when this story took place, this is where Squadron number 253 were based. And it was from here that Sgt Allgood took off on this fateful flight. Some people would have gone, sod it, I'm not filming in this weather, I'm going to go home, but I sat in a traffic jam on the M25 for about 40 minutes to get here, so we're doing this no matter what. Obviously, that is until I get back to the edit suite and find out that none of this footage is usable. I can guarantee the moment I get in my car to drive home, the sun will come out. Kenley opened in 1917 during the First World War as a Royal Flying Corps station, and began as mainly a training and defensive airfield, hosting various squadrons that went out and patrolled for enemy aircraft and Zeppelin raids. And after the RAF was officially formed in 1918, Kenley became part of this newfangled air force. During the interwar years, it became a permanent station, and it was selected as one of the key bases that the RAF was going to use for rearmament and expansion in the 1930s. Obviously prompted by a certain political party in Germany growing their air power. Today, RAF Kenley is considered the most complete surviving Battle of Britain airfield. And as I saw in my walk around, many of the wartime features still remain here, despite being slightly overgrown now. There is also this incredible heritage trail around the old airfield, with information signs and things like that telling you about the history of Kenley and the part it played in the war, which was quite a significant one. It was actually one of the three main air bases or airfields that were tasked essentially with the defence of London during the Battle of Britain. RAF Kenley, alongside Biggin Hill and Croydon, formed part of No. 11 Group Fighter Command. And on the 18th of August 1940, which is often referred to as the hardest day, RAF Kenley was heavily attacked by the Luftwaffe, with bombing raids damaging runways, destroying hangars, and killing personnel on the ground. But despite this heavy attack, the airfield remained operational, and the following month saw the arrival of Sgt Harold Henry Allgood. Sgt Allgood was born in Cambridge in 1915, and when he left in July 1931 at the age of 16, he joined the RAF at Halton. He began there as an apprentice metal rigger, and by the sounds of things was incredibly active in the sports side of things too, specifically the swimming, where he won the Barrington Kennett Trophy in 1932 and various other senior events in 1934. And like a lot of young people working in and around aviation at the time, he volunteered for pilot training, and was eventually accepted on the 13th of September 1938. He trained at No. 11 Fighter Training School in Shawbury, Shropshire, until the 6th of April 1940, when of course the Second World War would have been in full swing, so he would have known full well what he was about to be involved in. He converted to flying Hurricanes, and he was posted to No. 85 Squadron, who were based at Lille-Seclin in France on the 14th of May. 2 days later, he was given his first task. And at this point, it's probably important to remember that this is a very good example of the kind of training that our Second World War pilots were getting. Harold Henry Allgood's training only really began in 1939, and by 1940, he was already expected to be flying in combat. It's just another thing that goes to show the incredible courage and bravery of the men who went up there and fought in the Battle of Britain. Because a lot of these men were not going up there as experienced pilots, they were going up there as complete newbies. Which brings us to Harold Henry Allgood's first flight in France. He was detailed to fly Hurricane serial number L1898, which it looks like may have been in a little bit of disrepair and was being flown to another airfield to be repaired, and that was in Merville. But during his flight there, he was shot down shortly after takeoff. He crash-landed northwest of Lille, and the plane overturned. It seems that Allgood was wounded during the crash, possibly injuring his collarbone during the crash landing, and was hospitalised for a short time afterwards. When Allgood was reported back after recovering on June the 22nd, he rejoined No. 85 Squadron, who were now at Martlesham Heath. And by the 11th of August 1940, things started to get a little better, and he shot down Messerschmitt Bf 109E, but on the same day was forced to return to base with his plane damaged by Messerschmitt Bf 110. Things then took another turn for the worse when he crashed during a dusk landing at Church Fenton on the 9th of September, which more or less brings us to the start of this story. And in September 1940, Allgood returned from France to join up with 253 Squadron here at RAF Kenley. Well, as expected, I've basically said everything I need to say here, and the sun's come out, the birds are singing. Oh well, maybe the rain will make for a slightly more dramatic video. Just a quick reminder that if you've enjoyed the video so far, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating videos and untold stories like this one. Back to the video. At 3:20 on the 10th of October, 9 Hurricanes from Squadron 253 took off from here at RAF Kenley to go on a routine patrol. Everything went as usual, and about 30 minutes into their flight, they were 20,000 feet above the eastern outskirts of Maidstone. And this is where things started to go wrong. Sergeant Allgood had taken up the position of Tail End Charlie, which was primarily used to refer to the rear gunner in a bomber, but was also used to refer to the last aircraft in a formation. At roughly 20 to 4, about 30 minutes into their flight, Allgood's Hurricane suddenly dived away from the rest of the formation. Now it's not clear whether the rest of his squadron noticed immediately, him being at the back of the group, but even if they had, there was little they could do to help. And before anyone could really understand what was happening, Allgood's Hurricane continued its dive and ultimately crashed into numbers 59 and 61 Albion Place. 59 and 61 Albion Place were right there. It's obviously completely different now. What was a long row of terraced houses is now a couple of older houses that I don't think were even there originally, and then these big blocks of flats and office buildings. So it is very different to how it was in 1940. At the time, 61 Albion Place belonged to 29-year-old Doris Woods, who was at home with her 7-month-old daughter, Patricia Audrey Woods. Her husband, Charles H. Woods, was at work at the time. And to add to the weight of this story even more, also staying at 61 Albion Place was her mother, Elizabeth Wooding, along with Mrs. Wood's 5 youngest siblings. Vera Wooding, 18, Brenda Wooding, 14, Mavis Wooding, 12, Sylvia Wooding, 10, and Brian Wooding, 6. And Mrs. Wooding's husband, Arthur, was also at work. They happened to be staying with Doris because they'd been forced to evacuate their own house due to an unexploded bomb nearby. So you can only imagine it must have been pretty cramped in there with everybody squeezed into this small terraced house. What Charles and Arthur could not have possibly imagined that day when they left to go to work was that they would be coming home to nothing but rubble. As, just before 4 p.m, Sergeant Allgood's Hurricane smashed into the building and immediately burst into flames. All 8 of the family members at 61 Albion Place were killed instantly, along with Sergeant Allgood. Now, it was never actually confirmed what happened. There was never a confirmed answer as to why Allgood's Hurricane suddenly dived out of formation and didn't stop until it hit 61 Albion Place. But what was assumed from just what happened in itself, that sudden unexpected dive out of formation with seemingly nobody in control of the plane, the most logical answer was that Harold Henry Allgood must have lost consciousness. And one more incredibly heartbreaking detail about this story is that eyewitnesses in Maidstone said that as Allgood's Hurricane was diving towards the ground, it looked like at the last minute he was trying to pull up, meaning there's a chance that just before the moment of impact, Allgood had regained consciousness, become aware of the awful situation he was suddenly in, and tried to save it at the very last moment. But unfortunately, it was just too late. It just makes it all the more heartbreaking that it seems like this had nothing to do with pilot error and was most likely some kind of malfunction with his oxygen supply. 8 members of one family were lost in an instant, and it meant that in this one incredibly tragic accident, Charles Woods had lost his wife and his 7-month-old daughter, and Arthur Wooding had lost his wife, 6 children, and his only grandchild, leaving just Charles, Arthur, and his 2 other adult children who were not in the house at the time. Sergeant Allgood's body was carried out of the wreckage, wrapped in his parachute, and buried on the 22nd of October at St Mark's Burial Ground in Cambridge. He was only 25 years old. And tragically, for his family, his brother Edwin, who was also involved in aviation during the war, was lost over the North Sea on the 29th of May 1942, who was lost when his aircraft ditched in the sea. And an inscription for Edwin was added to Harold's gravestone, to the memory of his elder brother, who has no known grave. And our victims from 61 Albion Place were buried at Maidstone Municipal Cemetery. Well, I am here in Maidstone Municipal Cemetery to try and locate the graves of the Woods and Woodings, the victims of this tragedy. They're not really on Find a Grave, so this could be a challenge. Well, it took a reasonable amount of walking to find them, but I did. Here in front of me are most of the Wooding family and Doris and Patricia Woods. Obviously, all actually part of the same family. If it wasn't heartbreaking enough reading about it, standing here knowing that the majority of this one family are buried right here in front of me, it's difficult to imagine the heartache, losing so much in what was just an accident, just a horrible, horrible accident. None of these women or children were off fighting on the front line, and the man flying the plane that killed them, he was just doing his duty, he was just doing his job. And whatever happened, he certainly didn't set out that morning expecting it to all end like this. And this is one of the things that always fascinates me about cemeteries, is walking through, you can walk past hundreds, literally hundreds and thousands of graves and never know the story, the life behind the person who is buried there. And so when we can tell the story, I think it doesn't just remind us that, these people were real people with real families living their lives, but it also reminds us that, that's the case for so many other people buried here. They lived their lives, they had families, friends, they loved, they lost, and their story shouldn't have to end with their deaths, which again is why I think it's so important to keep sharing these stories as long as we possibly can, because you know what, ultimately, we're only really gone when nobody remembers us. It's interesting as well that on their headstones they're listed as being killed in enemy action, when technically they weren't. Unless you look at the broader picture, where why was Squadron 253 flying that day? They were flying to protect people like this from the enemy, and so ultimately the enemy were the cause of death, because they wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Later in 1978, the crash site was going to be redeveloped into a DVLA office, and members of the Kent Battle of Britain Museum took advantage of that situation to excavate some of the remains of Allgood's Hurricane. And some of those artefacts that were recovered are on display at the Kent Battle of Britain Museum.
On that note, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video interesting, as heartbreaking as it ultimately was. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.